I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to Campfire Talk. This is where we sit around the fire, put our feet up with a cold drink, and let the conversation flow. Tom, do you have any announcements before we get going?
Absolutely. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. And if you like this show, you guys know what to do. It's so easy. You click like and click the subscribe if you want to get future content, if you haven't done so already. And if you really want to take an extra step, you can do so. We've made it so that you can do it for as little as $1 a month. If you're on YouTube, go to the description, and we have a link to Patreon. Or if you're not on YouTube, you can just go to Patreon/Creek Devil, and you can go ahead and do take that extra step there. So, but either way, we're glad you joined us, and you guys are the reason we're here. So thank you.
I want to mention too before we get started, I'm officially retiring from my employment here this week. So, having said that, right now we put just the interviews. Well, we put all these shows on just YouTube, and I do put some of the older interviews. I'm working through the backlog on all the other platforms, Apple and iTunes and all those. So I'm going to start putting these other shows on those platforms as well. So watch for that coming up soon. But if you're on YouTube, we'd really appreciate you hitting the like button, because that's what gets the show seen by other people. So when people say, geez, you guys have such great content, you should have more viewers, more views, and more subscribers. We would, but people aren't seeing the show because it's not getting in their notifications, or their, when you bring up something on YouTube, it has all the stuff on the side there, the recommendations. So the show's not getting in the recommendations. That's why people aren't seeing it as much as they probably should. So having said that, I probably shouldn't sit and scroll through Facebook in the mornings. Because I see things sometimes, and there's some interesting things, and sometimes it's how we find our guests for the Saturday shows. But, I look just to see what's out there, and sometimes I see something that just kind of, it just kind of throws me for a loop because it's wrong. There was, and I wished I would have taken the guy's name down. I don't know if he's on my friends list or which Bigfoot group this came out of, but there was a picture of this guy. And what he stated under it was, last Monday, checking out a bone we found at Ape Canyon cabin site on July 10th, I'm sorry. On the site on the 99th anniversary of the 1924 attack. So I look at this picture and I'm thinking, well, I think they're mistaken about the location. Because this guy, he's an older guy, and then he looks pretty clean and fit, and I'll bet you they only walked about 20 feet from their vehicle. And I say that because he's not sweaty. I doubt that he hiked up onto the plains of Abraham. That's quite a chore even today. And there's a great big fir tree behind him, and there's on the left side of the picture, and on the right side there's some vine maple. And I can tell you from having been to the cabin site that neither of those kinds of vegetation are up there. It's just alpine timber what's there, and it's relatively small, and there's no leafy trees up there. So I guess I'll say, if you go back to Fred Beck's account, he dictated the story to his son, and I think it was 1966 is the date of that book. It's a booklet called I Fought the Ape Man of Mount St. Helens, and where he recounts the story in the beginning, and then the second part of the book is his own thoughts and everything, which are a little on the squirrely side. But the account was pretty interesting. But he states right in there that it was 2 miles east of Mount St. Helens, and at the head of Ape Canyon is exactly 2 miles east of Mount St. Helens. And then when they left the following day after Beck shot one of the creatures and it fell 400 feet into the canyon, they made their way out to the Spirit Lake Ranger Station. Well, when we went there in November of 1976, a bunch of my friends and I, 6 of us went. And that was on information from a college student that John Green gave my phone number to, and this was sometime after I met Green, and I can't remember exactly how long it was after. For some time I thought it was just a couple of months, but I met him in Dahinden in the summer of 1975, and we didn't go to the cabin site until November 76. But this college student, him and his friends had done some extensive research because it was a paper they were writing on the subject of Bigfoot. So they knew the location. They'd been there, where the cabin had existed. It burned down in the early 60s. But they'd been to the location, and they had, cut some small, I don't know if they were the trees or the branches, but they tied them between trees, kind of makeshift benches. And he told me exactly how to find the place. And you had to go to the trailhead past Spirit Lake Ranger Station, which still existed there back in those days, and you drove past it and where the road ended, and there was kind of a turnaround there, and then you could hike up to what was called Windy Pass at that time. Today it's just Windy Ridge, because when the mountain blew in 1980, it just wiped all that out. And then you had to hike. It was about, I want to say, 4 or 5 miles in there, but it was a pretty tough hike going up that ridge. And half the time you're knee deep in pumice, so you got to be in pretty good shape to get up there. So that's the trail they took, the same trail we took. And you hike across the Plains of Abraham on the eastern side until you get to the head of Ape Canyon. And, looking at this picture, and there are no roads up there, never have been. You can't even get to it from the eastern side. And I can't remember what river that is. I think it's the Lewis River on that side. I could be wrong, but I think that's what it is. And there's no roads up into Ape Canyon. And I really doubt, looking at that picture, that this person had done any kind of hiking to get up to that spot. I don't know, what all do you think?
Well, when you look at the Google Earth image, when it's zoomed in, looking at the trees, you can tell right then he's not in the right place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's completely different kinds of trees up there. And like I said, we were 18 when we went in there in 1976, and we did the hike twice. And even at 18, you get pretty sweaty and grungy on that hike, because it's a tough hike. It's not easy. I hear something. I hear voices.
What?
That was me. I didn't have my phone muted. Jessica just walked in, and I said, "What's the temp?" She was looking at the temperature. I have a digital clock, and temp. It's only 100. What was it? 111.
Oh,
it's only
my
111.
gosh. I think it's only 91 here right now.
So that was me and her whispering.
Oh my gosh.
And we didn't think you could hear me.
We could hear you. We were eavesdropping.
Hey, Cuz.
Yeah.
In the picture of the guy holding the bone, look in the lower right-hand corner in the background. Is that a river he's standing in front of?
It could be, sure.
That looks like water.
Yeah, it probably is. And they may have been able to drive. They may have been able to drive right to the Lewis River up there.
Over his shoulder and under his elbow, it looks like water.
Yeah.
Well, when I first glanced at it, I kind of thought it was so white in the picture that I thought it might even be a building. And I thought, well, if he's up in Ape Canyon, there's no buildings like that. That's for darn sure.
No.
Well, when I first opened it, I thought it was Bobo from Finding Bigfoot.
It does kind of look like him, doesn't it?
Oh, no.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, Bobo's he's gotten so thin. He's lost so much weight. No, he doesn't even look like that anymore.
No, I think this is an older guy than him. Like I said, I apologize.
Well,
I'm
going
to post this on the JRG Bigfoot research page after this show posts, and so people can see both his picture and what he said, and and then a couple of the Google Earth images showing the actual location. And I know a lot of people are confused about that, but we've been there. We know exactly where it was. And these guys, they probably don't know. They're probably just confused. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They probably had wrong information, and they genuinely thought that that's where they were. But I'm here to tell you that's not the location just by the elements in this picture. And that's why sometimes you need to kind of pick pictures apart. When people post things and say things, question it.
Well, that's kind of what I was wondering.
Did he make a comment about the... Oh, I'm sorry. We're all talking over each other. Did he make any comment about the bone that he was holding?
No, just all he said was, let's see, go back here. It says, okay. It says, last Monday, this is all he posted, last Monday, checking out a bone we found at the Ape Canyon cabin site on July 20th. On site on the 99th anniversary of the 1924 attack. So I don't know exactly what they're trying to convey here, but it's incorrect information.
Forrest, can you make out what kind of bone that is?
Well, it looks like it belongs to an ungulate. It's a fairly fresh bone too, so
that's what I was thinking.
So probably a deer bone.
It looks like it's probably a deer bone. It's probably what it is.
Yeah, you find a lot of that kind of stuff in that region.
That doesn't look anything. There's nothing remarkable about it that I can tell.
No. I mean, it's sort of like, trying to give the impression like, well, look, we went to the site and we found things that you should pay attention to, and it's just lots wrong with that. And I'm not trying to make the person feel bad or the people who posted this, but if you're going to convey stuff to people out there who don't know, try to be as correct as you can about it.
Well, why don't you give us a quick synopsis of what the site was like and what you found as a teenager, as a kid, when you guys went up there and actually went to the site? Because if I recall correctly, the cabin had burned down, and so that's where you guys had went there. But you found the foundation. Is that
no? There was nothing
spot on
there
with that, or?
There was nothing there. Those college students from Portland, Oregon, they had done research and actually located, I think he said they located the mining claim and where the location of the cabin was. And you got to remember, too, there are pieces in the story where you can figure it out without all that information. It was, the creature was what's known as Ape Canyon today. Fred Beck, the morning after the attack, they went outside the cabin door and saw one of the creatures. He shot it, and it fell 400 feet into the canyon. Well, that's not going to happen from the bottom of the canyon. That's at the top of the canyon. And he had a 30-30. In fact, I think in the book there's a picture of him holding the rifle he actually shot the creature with. And, of course, it's open sights. And you have to be within a certain range with open sights with a 30-30 to shoot something. So it wasn't that far. The cabin location is not that far from the head of Ape Canyon. A couple 100 yards maybe. And so when we hiked up there, when Windy Pass was still there, Windy Pass was, and you hiked a long way up that slope. It was a steep slope, and it's still steep today to go up to Windy Ridge. I've got some of my old buddies went up there, just hiking up to it a few years back, and I got pictures somewhere. And of course, it looks a little different, but it's just as difficult a climb. So it used to be just there was a rock formation up there, and it was just wide enough to go through. And we encountered a group of hunters on horseback up there, but that was the only other people up there. And like I said, no roads into that area, even from the south. The roads were still several miles away, so it wasn't. You couldn't drive in there then. You can't drive in there today. And it's just what's called the Plains of Abraham on the eastern side. It's just a rocky plain that's about 2 miles wide, kind of a big shelf. And not much vegetation up there because it's the altitude, and because it's right in the summertime, kind of right at the where the snow line used to be, at that elevation. I'd have to look it up to see what the elevation is, but things don't grow up there real well. There were some scrubby trees and some bushes and things, but not a lot. I mean, it was mostly open country and very rocky, and what you'd expect near a volcano. So we camped. The college students told me exactly where to find it. They said, you hike however far it was towards Ape Canyon, the head of Ape Canyon, you'll find a group of trees there. And they said you'll see where we had camped in there. And they'd cut some of these, what looked like poles. It was probably some of the smaller trees they cut down, and then made makeshift benches by tying, these cut poles between other trees with twine. And we found that spot, and that's where we camped. And they told me that was the site where the cabin had existed before it burned down.
Whenever they were attacked that night, didn't they say they were throwing boulders and trying to get in, like break down the door or whatnot?
I don't think it was boulders, but they were throwing a lot of rocks at them. And they were trying to get in. They'd push against the door.
Did they say if the rock throwing started first and then they started beating on the cabin? Cause
the rocks.
It looks like if you got some beating on the cabin and then you got others throwing rocks, you don't want to hit your buddies down there that are trying to get into the cabin.
Well, he estimated that there was a group of these things. I can't remember what number they estimated, but they figured there were quite a few of them up there. And there was a pretty good film depiction years ago, but they said that there were some inaccuracies, like, I don't remember offhand. It was something about the axe head that one of the creatures had actually reached through. They called the material they put in between the logs chinking, to keep the cold out and stuff.
Yeah.
And some of that had been knocked loose, and one of the creatures was actually able to reach in there and grab whatever it could, I think the axe. And I can't remember if that was accurate or parts of it were inaccurate. I'd have to go back and look at the story, but yeah.
I heard that. I think it said that it reached through and grabbed the axe handle, and then one or two guys grabbed it to try to pull it back to keep the creature from taking it from them.
Yeah, the story's out there. I mean, people can look it up pretty easy, but and I have it in my first book, Notes from the Field, but it was a night of terror. I can sympathize. We had kind of the not as terrifying a night because we didn't have guns to shoot at them, but the Clark Ranch thing. I know all too well what it's like being surrounded by these things all night long and have them kind of, mess with you. But they had shot at these things the day before or before dark fell, and it probably ticked them off. Yeah. So they were trying to get them, and they said, thankfully the cabin was fairly stout, so they didn't get in. But
when did it burn down?
I think it was 1963.
Okay.
And the circumstances around that were kind of, unknown. They don't know why it burned down. I mean, it's not in a location where, lightning could have hit it, certainly, up there. Because it gets pretty stormy up there.
Yeah. Go ahead, T. I didn't mean to cut you off, buddy.
Oh, no, you're good. I was just going to pose a hypothetical question. Could you imagine what it would be like if the cabin wasn't stout and they managed to work their way in?
Well, the story would have never got out. In fact,
that'd be a different story.
Yeah, that's something he mentioned in there. They'd agreed they weren't going to tell anyone. And then the guy that was kind of the leader of the group, the one he called Hank, when they hiked back out, and again, the only trail in and out of there is from the Spirit Lake side, where the ranger station used to be. And that's where they hiked out to. They took their packs, and they said they left about $200 worth of equipment up there, which, 1924, that was a lot of money. So they hiked out, and then, their leader, Hank, he went and told the ranger at the station what happened. That's how the story got out.
Oh, yeah. That's the end of that.
So much
I'm looking at Mount St. Helens.
The terrain's a little bit different.
Google Earth, and that.
Yeah, it's a little bit different there where the cabin, where I've got it marked there.
Right.
It looks a little bit different today, obviously, than it did back then, because when the mountain blew, that ice melt and everything from the glaciers, did some pretty good washouts over there. So, but where I'd marked that's pretty close to where we were. And again,
Was the mine they were working in between the cabin and 8 Canyon?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Like somewhere in the middle?
I think today, records of the Vanderwhite, that was the name of the mine, don't exist anymore. And I'm not sure why, because I think they've got to register that with, I think it was the state of Washington or the county. I'm not sure. I read it somewhere and I can't remember what the details were. So I guess if anybody could find that information, you know, that'd be one more piece in the puzzle there. But it's not really much of a puzzle. I mean, you know, they were near the head of Ape Canyon. It's pretty obvious where that is.
Yeah.
And like I said, you know, those college students back in the mid-'70s. What's that?
Will?
Yeah.
I said, when was the last time you were up?
That was in 76. That's the last time we went there. And, you know, there wasn't anything to see then. There's even less to see there now. So I don't know if anybody wanted to make a pilgrimage there, what the purpose would be. But, you know, because like I said, there's really nothing to see up there. Now
It was kind of like when people kept trying to go see where the Patterson-Gimlin film was filmed. Everybody would go to the wrong place because it had changed so much.
It has changed a great deal, yeah. And a lot of those places do, you know, especially more time passes. You know, you get a lot of, you know, brush and weather and things that change topography. So to me, it's, you know, if you happen to be in a place. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Well, I'm just gonna reiterate what you're saying, and that is, I've seen areas that will change in one season.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
if it's an unmaintained area, you know, you come back and you find, wow, boy, those little saplings are pretty good sized trees now, and
right.
That's not there, and the log used to be there, it's gone, it's washed away, and all that kind of stuff.
To me, I mean, this is my personal outlook. You know, if I just happen to be in a place that had, you know, some historical event attached to it, I might think, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. Like, you know, times I've been up in the Bluff Creek area, you know, there was names in John Green's books, like Onion Mountain and those kinds of places, you know, and there's signs, you know, as you drive up through there that indicate that. And I think, oh, that's kind of cool. I remember reading about that in Green's book. Other than that, you know, big deal. So what's going on with everybody besides the bad weather lately, hot weather?
I've
just been busy working this morning.
Forrest, we'll go with you first.
I just said that, well, it's I'm going to be pretty boring because nothing's been happening here. We've now got motion lights on every corner of the house.
Oh,
so,
good. Very good.
They're probably not liking my location anymore, I'm hoping.
Well, you know, that does make a difference. Tracy, how about you, man?
Yeah?
I just been working this morning, been busy taking care of things around the house and all. Didn't take a break till right before you called, so I'm just chilling right now.
It's a good reason to take a break. Yeah, it's getting warm here too.
Yes, sir.
Not like it is in Texas, but I think last I checked a few moments ago, it's 91 now and climbing. I think it's going to be 102 today. Somebody asked about.
It's 93 here right now, but the humidity is way up there. I mean, it's a sticky feeling that you sweat. You're covered with water as soon as you walk outside. It's just that damp, you know.
You know, I remember that from when I went to basic at Fort Knox, and I wished I had, you know, the little book that you get when you complete basic and AIT that shows, you know, they put all the pictures of stuff you did throughout your cycle. And I was in a whole bunch of the ones in my cycle, and there was one picture of me and a buddy he was from Nevada, and it was part of our the weapons qualification part of the cycle where we were in part of Holder Complex tearing apart an M60 machine gun, and my first issue was the old starch green uniforms. and you can see that we're just
Oh,
soaked.
yeah.
We're just completely soaked in sweat. I think the tips of my collars and my shirt were the only thing dry. And you can see our hair is just it's like somebody poured water on us. It was so humid and hot that day. I do not miss that at all, I'll tell you.
The only saving grace right here right now is there's a little bit of a breeze blowing. If it wasn't for that, you wouldn't be able to stand it outside right now, or I could.
Lord, that's crazy, huh?
Cuz, have you
Yeah, I
ever
tell you,
gotten in touch? Oh, go ahead, Tracy. I'm sorry.
I was just going to agree with Will right there.
Cuz, have you been able to get in touch with that retired fire captain?
Yeah, we chat whenever I need to have a chat with him. I can reach out to him.
He'd be good to have on the show.
Yeah, he might. I mean, if I can ask him if he'd come on. We did do.
Does he say?
Hmm?
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say we did do a recording with him, and I did post that as a show. But having all of you being able to question him, I think would be pretty valuable.
Yeah. When is the last time you talked to him?
Oh, gee. Well, we communicate on Facebook, so every once in a while, we'll send a message back and forth. Just it depends on what's going on.
Does he still have things going on his property out there?
Well, he does. He talks about stuff. No, are you talking about the CAMPFIRE captain or the other guy?
Yeah, CAMPFIRE captain. Yeah.
Yeah, he retired from CAMPFIRE, and I think he's got another job. He went back to work for the government, I think. But he doesn't live in California anymore. But I believe he still got his property in the Sierras, so and he did have some stuff going on there. In fact, that's how he reached out to me, was he had stuff going on there. And he sent me some pictures, and it was, the markings, and there was some scat, I think, on his property. And hopefully I can get over there and, kind of nose around his property and have a look at that area. It's an active area for sure. And I think I told you guys, he's the one that told me in one of the major fires here a few years back, him and another captain, they were behind, the lines where the fire was. They were at a food drop, and there were some other things logistically going on, and they were having a discussion about something, and they saw one of the creatures sneaking up on the food drop.
If that don't make you a believer, I don't know what will.
I can tell you from having fought forest fire for the Forest Service, it can be fairly chaotic. Not so much on the lines because, I was a squad boss. I was in charge of half the crew, the fire crew. Fire crews are about 23 people or so, and then they have it divided in half, kind of like an army squad. And I was in charge of one of the teams, the two teams. And it's pretty organized up on the line, when the crews are out working. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of stuff going on. So, logistically, the people that are paying attention to what they're doing, not so much, the wildlife or whatever, unless it's like right there in your face. And these guys were just having this discussion. And I think it was late in the day, towards the evening. And, they saw this thing sneaking up on the food drop.
Didn't it make off with some of it? Wasn't it able to get some?
It probably did, sure. Yeah, I mean, they were just kind of like, what the heck?
How far away from it were they? Did they say?
I don't remember offhand. I don't think they were that far. A couple 100 feet, maybe.
Okay. And I was thinking if it came in close enough for them to see it with no problem, it must have been pretty dang hungry.
Well, like I said, behind the lines, it's pretty chaotic. So, and the people out doing stuff, aren't really paying a whole lot of attention except their job, to get whatever it is they need to those crews, or on site, like the water trucks and things like that. And they contract all that stuff out. So, they got to coordinate those people, and they're not up, it's not like what people think. You're not actually up there trying to put the fire out. You're not going to put a forest fire out. They
No.
they do all the retardant drops and things like that. That's to keep a fire from spreading. They drop that on green foliage. So, but the fuel that's already burning, that's going to burn. They just try to contain it. And the same with the water trucks. They're putting out hot spots so a fire doesn't reignite in a place. So you get all these people doing stuff behind the scenes, and they're not paying a lot of attention to other stuff. So a creature like that could certainly sneak around pretty much unnoticed, unless they're just walking down.
Especially with all that smoke.
Yeah, it depends on the fire. The one I was on, we didn't have a lot of smoke most of the time where we were working, and I think that's because of the way the winds are blowing.
That's good.
But yeah, we heard stories, but we didn't see anything ourselves up there on that particular one. But, I've talked to people. Well, we talked about the guy who was in charge of the cultural committee at the Klamath Reservation. When I was writing my first book, I went there to talk with the natives there. And guy's name was Gerald Skelton, good guy. And he was talking to me about there was a native firefighting crew working a fire in that region, and it was a number of years before, but they were working their part of the line, and here this creature come running out of the timber, its fur smoldering, and it fell down amongst them and got up and took off. Well, they had handprints in the soil, and somebody cast handprints, and he said they had them on display in Klamath Falls for years. And I can't remember what the building was. He told me at the time, but I don't remember. And then they just disappeared one day. I don't know what that noise is.
What is that?
We're getting strange sounds. The microphone picks everything up. And
sound like a cat purring.
Something.
Robotic cat.
Yeah.
Lord have mercy.
Well, that brings up a question. I've always wanted to know, do mountain lions purr? Just getting off topic a little bit.
I think they do, don't they?
I think they do. Yeah.
But how do you know? How do you find out? Do you walk up to one and scratch his ears and pet him? And
there is a youth camp it's about 70 or 80 miles away from here. But they used to have a mountain lion in a cage there, and you could walk up and get next to the cage, and most of the time the mountain lion would just lay there and look at you, But he would purr from time to time, and it sounded like a diesel engine running.
That's a cat you don't disappoint. It's like, pet me,
right?
Or else. Or how you pet your cat, sometimes they roll over in the back and you scratch their stomach, and then you get claws from all 4 feet. You don't want
in
that
a nanosecond.
Yeah, you don't want that to happen with a mountain lion.
No way. That cat had huge claws too. I'd see him.
Trump
he
does
would
that to me all the time.
Well, we had some great comments on Fred's show Saturday. So.
Oh yeah.
I'm still kind of curious about the devil monkey stuff he was telling.
Which part?
Well, any of it. I mean, that's obviously not a Sasquatch if it's got a long, skinny tail. So kind of makes you wonder what the heck that is.
I don't know if anybody ever said that it was a long, skinny tail. They said it had a long tail on it. So, I'd heard about those when I was up there in Alaska. And then I had a friend who was Athabascan that had called and told me about the incident at Salcha, and I couldn't for the life of me remember where she had said it had happened. And then when Fred and I were talking, he told me, he said, "Oh, that's the one that happened," because I related the incident to him, and it was just exactly like how he portrayed it on the show. And he said that was in Salcha. And I said, yeah, well, she had called and told me about that. And up in the Copper River, they talk about them all the time. All the First Nation people up there.
You know,
and you've even had hunters that have claimed to have seen them. So, you know.
I talked to Fred just, I think it was the day after we recorded with him, for about a half an hour, and he was telling me that on that Copper River area, he said it's weird coincidence that after we had discussed just that area, he got 5 calls from people in that area with recent activity, and I think he's up there today.
He's up there investigating today.
Yeah. So I said, wow, that is a coincidence. Yeah.
It is. Remember the petroglyph you sent me a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
From British Columbia?
Right.
That's kind of what it made me think of, is either they were thinking of Bigfoot, but it had ears. So I wonder if those
it looks like a
darn things.
It looks like a monkey.
It does.
And you got to think, well, now how do these folks, they didn't have monkeys up there. How'd they know that? See, now with the Bigfoot, they wouldn't have ears like that. Because the Sasquatch, you don't see ears.
So either the monkeys had made it that far south, or maybe some of them had traveled up to an area where they saw these monkeys and were so, made such an impression on them that they made rock art out of it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
What I found so interesting is that they all were saying that they were lemur-like in their movements. But, the thing about it is lemurs leap from limb to limb, and they don't really have, I guess, a peculiar way of that would, but they do look different because they have more of a prognathism, more of a muzzle out there, almost a dog-like appearance on their face, So they're very lower order simians. And actually, Chuck and I were talking about this the other night because he says, do you think they could be lemurs? I said, well, there was a giant lemur that lived on Madagascar, and I said it actually existed there up until a few hundred years. I'm going to say, I think even into the 1800s that they had, and they still do have people say that they have sightings of them. But lemurs are not vicious. I mean, you don't have. In fact, I don't know of any monkey, with the exception of chimpanzees, and they're apes. They're considered a great ape, so they're not even in the monkey classification. They go out and are murderous. I mean, when they found this camp, there was blood everywhere. I'm not talking about guts and stuff. We're just talking about blood. And the tent was shredded. And the people that came up on the site and found it actually saw several of these individuals. I want to say 4 or 5 of them up there. And these were, even the giant lemurs don't get 4 to 5 feet tall. And even when they stand up, and lemurs do that sometimes, and they'll run briefly on their hind legs. But, bipedalism is a form of motion that is unique exclusively to man. And Bigfoot, if you want to throw him in there, So you don't have other monkeys or lemurs or chimpanzees or even gorillas that just spend a lot of time walking bipedally. So these things were running bipedally and then ran quadrupedally and then jumped up in trees and took off. And, who goes in? I've never had them. You've never had any instances where you hear of monkeys in areas where they have monkeys, like Africa and Asia and stuff, attacking humans and tearing them to shreds and evidently carting the body off to consume it someplace. So, now chimpanzees, we've heard about that being done by chimpanzees, but we're talking about a totally different primate here.
Yeah,
where was it they found the primate bones? I think it said it was in Texas. They found primate bones or something?
They found some primate bones, and they looked lemur-like. And they also had, in Alabama, they had found some. So it was down here in the South.
When was it?
So, when was that? It wasn't too long ago. I don't remember the exact date. Don't hold me to that, because I'd be a liar if I gave you a date. I could look it all up. You know, had I known we were going to discuss this or go here, I would have looked it up and gotten it for you. But it wasn't too long ago. They were fossil finds, is what they were, and Texas is chunk full of fossils, dinosaurs and mammals and such. So, and all across the South they are, because this used to be a very tropical region at one point in time. But, you know, you've got to remember, they're making discoveries all the time. I mean, just look at all the archaic forms of man that they're finding in Africa now. And they really are revamping the age time on when man actually arrived in the Americas, and they've just pushed it back and pushed it back and pushed it back until, you know, it's nothing like it was, say, 30, 40 years ago. So, and some of these, and I fault people in the academic world all the time for this one feature, is that they seem to think that everything that happened 50 years ago or 100 years ago is set in stone and it can't ever be changed. Well, that's not true, because with all the new discoveries that are being made all the time, you have to change. You have to reformat your thinking, because otherwise you're just stuck in a rut. And way too many of them are stuck in that rut. So, you know, I have to give credit where credit's due with Meldrum, you know, sticking his neck out, and that's exactly what he's done. He has stuck his neck out to study Bigfoot and such. I mean, I may not agree with him on everything, but and I'm sure he probably doesn't agree with me on everything. But you know, hey, that's all part of it. You know, you need to sit down at a table and discuss these things, and they're all theories. Let's face it, it's all theories. So. Uh-oh.
Quiet. I think everybody's like thinking, you know, we talk about stuff and we're just, you know, everybody's thinking.
I got something. You know how Fred said that up in Alaska there was one Sasquatch chasing a bear, then another one jumped on it, they killed it, they started scooping out drinking the blood?
Mm-hmm.
Because you remember when me and you were talking about how we wonder what infant Sasquatch will eat? And we started talking about possibly blood.
Right. Well,
I wonder.
Go ahead.
If that kind of backs up. I mean, you know, when they're newborns, you know, if they breastfeed, you know, obviously I don't know that, but as they start to get older and if they haven't developed their teeth yet, what do they do, you know, for sustenance and whatnot? And when we were talking about maybe it was blood, when I heard Fred telling that story, that made me think more, okay, maybe they do.
Well, those are adults doing that. And I can't go into any detail, but a friend of mine who's, well, I just won't say it because I can't give any information on him. But through that, I found out that the adults do that. And, of course, it goes back, you know, to the Minnesota Iceman story when Frank Hansen related what he saw when he encountered the creatures. After he shot the deer, they were drinking the blood. But the infants, I would suspect, and Forrest, I don't know with other primates, that they probably get their teeth pretty early if they're not already born with them.
And well, that's just what I was going to interject here, is that very often primates are actually born with teeth, and not regularly, but every once in a while you'll see them. And you know what, it happens in humans too. I mean, I've had a grandson that was born with 4 teeth. So, I mean, it does happen. Not regularly, but it does occur. But primates develop at a far rapider rate than humans do. So, they have to. You know, they don't have the luxury of being able to be carted around by mom for, you know, 10 or 15 years. But not that we cart our kids around, albeit said that there are probably some women that do. But I would not imagine. I have never seen any monkey species where they've fed on blood. Even when chimpanzees kill, I have never heard of any incident where they rip the stomach open up and are feeding on blood. And you know what? Even the imagery of that in your mind is rather distressing. So, but the other thing is, sidebar here, that I have heard, excuse me, I have heard of instances where you've got people in captivity, such as Holocaust. They never had the opportunity to do this, but there was a movie that I actually watched, and it was based on a true story in Laos, and these guys were captive, and they actually went out and found the water buffalo and would make tiny cuts on the water buffalo, and they would drink the blood because they were so low on protein, and blood is an absolute perfect source of getting that immediately. And by doing that, they could these prisoners could get their protein without evidently killing the buffalo to eat the meat. So that was is something that they did, and it's not like they all became vampires or anything like that. They fully understood what they were doing. So the imagery in your mind of ripping open a bear and then taking your hand and scooping out the blood in the abdominal cavity is just, I don't know, guys. It's very distressing to me.
It's what I was told too from my contactee. They were pretty stressed out by, what they saw. So, it's whether we like it or not, it's one of the aspects, one of the things they do, and it's pretty gruesome.
Well,
yeah,
it is, and I think that it kind of illustrates the fact that, how can these people be out there, these flute players, I call them, love children or whatever they are, that say that
damn hippies.
Well, that's kind of what imagery that comes to mind when you think about that too, because all of us grew up in that, lifestyle. We didn't grow up in it, but we grew up around it. Let me correct
during
that,
that period.
I never
sure.
participated. I never participated in any of that. I still have people go,
Forrest,
Goodwill,
you did.
Do this?
Hey,
No, I didn't.
I remember going to camp when I was in junior high, and you go to camp in junior high, the school puts it on, you go, we went up by Mount Rainier, and it was, typical camp, you can imagine from that time period. And I remember one day we went to this, I don't know if she was supposed to be a counselor or what, but she was a hippie. And I remember all of us kind of looking at each other, and, we're probably, 12, 13 years old, thinking, this person's insane.
Yeah. Well, I never had a social drink till I was 25, so I guess you guys are probably going to laugh now and think, oh, you must have been boring. But you know what? I didn't think I was, and my friends didn't. That was the kind of people I hung with. We just didn't participate in that type of behavior. So, but I had some friends that did, so I just didn't hang out with them very much. Anyway, but I guess the point I'm trying to say is that, it kind of illustrates, and you would think that some of these people would take it to heart, that, Bigfoot maybe just might not be such a nice critter, and that's why I kind of always go back to the fact that I think that they exhibit an awful lot of similar patterns of behavior as chimpanzees.
Well, Fred said
then unfortunately, chimpanzees exhibit way too much human-like behavior. So I think that explains why there's so much DNA shared between us, because you know what? Humans aren't so nice sometimes.
Yeah, Fred said it very well when he was talking to the elders there, and with some of the language things he was saying, like the names, translate into monster. And from my current contacts, they say the same thing. It's, if you can literally visualize what a real monster would be, this is what you're talking about. They're not the friendly forest friends, and people who want to perpetuate that nonsense, are going to end up on a menu at some point. But I think because they know so little about the real topic, they're never going to get close to one to be in that situation. So, their nonsense gets perpetuated.
If you noticed, Will, Fred was very careful, and that he eliminated on the fact that the ones that had constant contact with them were the ones that referred to them as monsters. And this is where I get a little irritated with some people and say, "Oh, well, look, the Native Americans say that they're the protectors of the woods. They protect the forest. They're good. They're this." And I'm like thinking in my mind, how much contact have they really had with them? And that was something that Fred made a very clear point on, was that the ones that had constant contact with them called them monsters.
They did. And
they truly, exhibited that type of behavior. And the Native Americans that were not in constant contact with them, that may have never had any contact with them other than, hearsay, they were the ones that had a more...
the more peaceful outlook or whatever.
Yeah, peaceful, the gentle forest giant type of... ideal of them.
What I was told by the Hyena elder that contacted me when I was writing notes from the field, he made it very clear that's that point exactly. And he said oftentimes, let's say, because people generalize. They like to generalize about everything. That's what we do, because in our brains we're just trying to put everything in a box and put it where it's in its place so we can explain things. But it's a little more complicated than that. So like with a native group, there might be however many bands, tribes, bands, and so on. And he said, people might generalize what that group of natives, that particular tribe says, but he says it could be based on simply one person's experience from whenever. And maybe that person didn't have such a bad experience. Maybe they saw one, there was no interaction, what have you. And they translated that as a positive experience. Whereas, the people that we know, like, poor Win, when he was with us, he talked about, and I've heard this from other people at the Flathead Reservation, that they will all say they're man-eaters. The natives in Alaska tell you they're man-eaters. There's plenty of people that have lots of contact with the creatures who will say just that. So you have to be careful when you make generalizations about what anyone says.
Well, unfortunately, too often humans do that. We tend to generalize, and that gets us in trouble.
Exactly. I totally agree. Tom sent me a link. I don't know if he sent it to you guys that show some petroglyphs. Oops, where are we at here?
Yeah, that's on the Columbia River.
Right, and there's one of them that's, and that one I don't see the ears on it, but it's definitely, it's a simian-looking face.
What did you send it to, Tom, on my email?
No, I will text you right now. Give me a second.
Okay, yeah, I didn't get it.
Shoot me one too, T.
Oh, Fisher's Landing in Vancouver.
You got it.
Oh, let me see. On that particular...
British Columbia is another place where they get a lot of sightings. I think I told you about the time that my daughter and I were driving through, and we'd stopped at and I wished I could... I can't remember I want to say it was IGNUAT, Inuit was the little town, and don't hold that to me if somebody goes and looks it up and says, oh, I can't find that. I may be wrong on the spelling, but we stopped there all the time because they actually had a nice restaurant there, and it was on the CAMPFIRE Highway, which is out to the west of the actual Alcan, and it cuts several hundred miles off the trip, so we used to head up that when we went back and forth from Alaska. And we were there. We had gotten there just the day after that they had a sighting in the town. And it was like walking down the middle of the town and stood underneath a pole light out there for quite a while, looking around like it was trying to decide which road to take, you know. And it was kind of like at an intersection, and that's exactly what the guy described it in the restaurant when we were, you know, talking. He said that it was standing under the street light, looking around like it was trying to decide which way to progress down which road. So, you know, they have sightings up there all the time. Hunters will tell you all about it and everything. And that's where I saw my two weird creatures up there. And you know what? I owe you guys an apology because Tom had asked me to tell you all about that. And not to get sidetracked here, but I had talked about my first sighting of a Bigfoot up in Coeur d'Alene, because when he asked me that, somebody was calling in, and it bleeped out half of what he said, so I thought that's what he was talking about. So I was bad. So there's a lot of strange things up there in that part of the country.
Hey, Forrest. Always blame the computer. Don't take the heat yourself. Blame the machine.
Hey, this picture of I texted you guys the one image I was talking about, and it's titled "She Who Watches." The one that looks like a primate.
Oh, that's interesting, because a lot of times they would refer to the Sasquatch as a she.
Well, it depends. I mean, when you look at different tribal names, sometimes they're she, sometimes they're he. It just depends. Like, I
was trying to think of the tribal name, and it totally escapes me.
There's one that's
not all the time.
The Cherniqua, you know, that Tom Seward told us about, and I've known about this one in the Denoskwa also. And let me think. Well, they're wild men or wild women of the woods. Or what those are called, the Cherniqua. But there's others, you know, it just depends. Some are like the Yakima Indians, theirs are the Owl Woman Monster. It depends, you know, on what they assign, you know, the role to.
For some reason, that first one looks like a raccoon.
Which one are you talking about?
The first one T sent me. Let me click on.
Well, there's a bunch of images there.
Yeah, the She Who Watches.
Yeah, that one's. It's not though. I mean.
Oh yeah, I know. It just reminds me of it.
Well, can I say something about the illustration? Are we looking at the pink rock? And, you know, we really need to put that out there, too, because people are going to be going, well, you're talking about something we can't see it.
Yeah,
so we need to put that out.
I'm gonna
your site so you can see it.
I'm gonna put all these on the JRG Facebook page along with the other images we talked about today.
I think the reason that they may do this, now this is just my own opinion, folks, with the large circles around the eyes, I think they're emphasizing the fact that that you always hear about everybody saying they have large eyes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason. I mean, you know, you're kind of limited on what you can do with rock unless you're just a real fantastic artisan and sculptor. So I think that's probably what's going on there.
And if you go and look at,
are y'all taking those little bumps on the top as being ears? Because I don't necessarily. I don't think that's.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I don't think that's ears. I think that's something that.
But you know, if you also go look at the carved wooden masks, the ceremonial masks, there's a lot of similarities. And then look at the nose.
Oh,
the nose is very. That's kind of telling. That's very much like the descriptions we get with noses on these creatures.
Yeah, they always refer to them as a hooded nose, but it seems like somebody, like a prize fighter, you know, you have a hooded nose, but it kind of is like smushed into the face.
Here's another key, too. Look at the mouth. Now, it's kind of a square, but that could be also symbolizing the pursed, whistling lips.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking.
Which is the hallmark of native artistry when it comes to these creatures.
I was thinking that, or maybe they're trying to represent it yelling or something, because you could kind of, looks like the mouth is open and the square part's the tongue.
Well, I don't know. I mean, like I said, if you go look at some of the native masks, when they're referring directly to these creatures, they have the pursed lips for whistling, and that's what that means.
Well, and two, you have to consider the fact that when the other thing is too, primates hoot, they always purse their lips like that too.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I hate to say it, but we are just about out of time. People are they're really liking this particular show. So we appreciate you guys listening, and enjoying the show. Any final thoughts, guys, before we wrap this piece up?
Not for me.
I'm good.
I like hearing the cat purring.
Is that on your end, Tom? Or is that Forrest?
No, you can't blame me for that one.
Not me.
All right, everyone.
But I put him up to it.
Well, it'll be interesting to find out what Chuck finds out from today. And, well, thanks for stopping by, everyone.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out